Hello everyone, it is Jazz here. Today I am doing my February wrap-up as well as my TBR for the month of March. And because I did the TimeHopAthon near the end of February, I'm also including all the books that I read for that readathon. And I just thought I would do the wrap-up all in one shebang. So there are 5 books to talk about, and let's talk about them now. The first book that I completed in the month of February was Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. This book collects stories from the original Norse mythology, but they are written in more of a novelistic approach. So there is a lot more dialogue and a little bit more character development and description included in this than there probably would be in a textbook kind of version of Norse mythology. So if you followed my channel for a while, you know that I love to read a Neil Gaiman book. He's one of my favorite authors. So of course when I heard that this book was coming out, I pre-ordered it. I got it on the day that it came out, and I of course immediately had to sit down and read it from cover to cover. I enjoyed reading this immensely. What's kind of cool about it is that it is not only a fast read, but it is also the kind of book where you don't necessarily have to read all the stories in order. You could pick it up and just read whatever story you're interested in, or you could read it from cover to cover if you so wish, because they are kind of like short stories. I also like that it introduces you to a lot of the stories in Norse mythology, but it is, like I said, a little bit more approachable. It's a little easier to read than probably some classic literature or textbook on this subject, and thus it's a very good introduction to this. And I also think it's a good book if you've never read any Neil Gaiman books before to pick up, just because he does use a lot of Norse mythology in his other comics and books that he writes. That is one of his favorite mythologies, as he says in the front of this book, so he does include it in a lot of his stories. And then if you read this, you would know a lot more about the mythology and what he's trying to do with his approach on some of his other books. This is the kind of book that I know that I will definitely enjoy rereading over and over again, and it's also one that I would like to listen to an audiobook, because it is kind of like hearing fairy tales or stories of that nature, and that's pretty fun. If you're looking for a fun, fast read that's mythological, this is definitely a book that I would recommend, and I gave it 5 stars. The next 3 books that I completed were books that I completed for challenges in the TimeHopAthon, and one of the challenges was to read one of the recommended children's books that the creators of the TimeHopAthon suggested. So I decided to read The Cricket in Times Square by George Selden. This book is about a cricket named Chester, and he is a country cricket, but one day he gets stuck in a picnic basket, and that sort of leads him to get on a train and end up in New York City near Times Square. A small boy finds him and he becomes a pet to that boy, and he also befriends a little mouse and a cat, and they become fast friends, and they discover that he has this amazing talent to create fabulous music, and a lot of stuff snowballs from there, from his fabulous talent. So when I started this book, I was like, why didn't I know about this book when I was a child? Like, part of my childhood missed out on this book, and it kind of makes me a little like, no, inside, because this thing is the cutest thing ever. It's one of the cutest stories I've ever read, because I love unlikely friendships between animals, and it is definitely one of those. I also liked a lot of the quotes and a lot of the things that happened. The journey is really simple because it is a children's book, but it kind of says a lot with it. So I thought that was a really excellent element of the writing and the way the words flowed and express things. And to add to the awesomeness of the book, it is the kind of book that is so short that you can just read it in a day or less. Definitely have to say I love The Cricket in Times Square. I think this is the first book in a series. I would totally be open to reading more books in this series and reading more about all the little characters in it. And yes, I still feel like I missed out on this as a child, though. I would have thought this was the bomb, but I'm glad that I read it now, and I gave this 5 stars. It's a new favorite. Next book I completed was a reread of Anne of the Island, which is the 3rd book in the Anne of Green Gables series by L.M. Montgomery. This book basically depicts the 4 years where Anne goes back to college after teaching for a few years in her teens. She decides to return to college and get her BA. And it basically just shows what happened through those 4 years. Everybody knows that I'm obsessed with this series because Anne books are my happy place. Like, I can't possibly be unhappy when reading an Anne book. Now, this one does have a little bit of a bittersweetness to it because it is more about growing up, and things that happen in it are occasionally kind of tear-uppy. I have to say, I think it's like chapter 14, like, makes me tear up, and I will never forget the first time that I read this as a kid. And I was on a road trip with just my dad, and I was like sitting there like tearing up at chapter 14 and sniffling, and he was like, "What in the world is wrong with you?" And I had to say, it still makes me tear up in places, this one, but in like a really good, happy I'm reading it way. Like, it's in this beautiful way. And I'm so glad that I reread it because there were a few things in there that I didn't remember, and I was like, I can't believe I didn't remember some of these characters because they are awesome. It's a good old time. I can't say enough about it. I just flippin' love this book. So if you haven't guessed already, I gave this 5 stars. And also, I think so far in my reread, it's one of my favorites of the 3 that I've reread. So, extra super awesomeness. The next book that I completed in February, and also the last book that I completed for the TimeHopAthon, was the book Fever 1793 by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is a historical fiction about a young girl named Maddie and her sort of trials and tribulations while the epidemic of the yellow fever that happened in 1793 was occurring. I did enjoy this book. I found it really interesting and engaging because it was a subject that I didn't really know much about from history, and it was really interesting to see how she researched it and approached it. And I also found it an incredibly fast read. I got through it really, really quickly, which to me kind of shows how engaged I was into the story. I will say though that this probably wasn't my super favorite of all of Laurie Halse Anderson's books that I've read, because I guess I just didn't feel like I connected to the characters as much as I have with other ones of her books. They're not bad characters by any means. I just feel like there was more emphasis on the events in this one than maybe the characters, and maybe that's why I didn't connect to them as much. Regardless, I still felt like it was a really well written, well put together historical fiction novel, and if you're looking for a short historical fiction that's a fast read, this is definitely one that I would recommend. I decided to give this 4.5 stars, but I rounded it up to 5 on Goodreads, and now I can say that I have completed a Laurie Halse Anderson historical fiction book now, so it's like, woohoo! The last book that I completed in the month of February was Fool by Christopher Moore. This is a parody slash satire novel based on Shakespearean literature. Now, it mostly focuses on King Lear because it is written from the point of view of the fool, that character in the play of King Lear, but it does include a lot of other sort of Shakespearean and other literature in its satire-ness. So it's a whole bag of tricks. I have kind of mixed feelings about this book, but I will start with the good things about it because that's always a good way to begin, is with the good things. So I will say that it was very amusing, and it was interesting to see the point of view of the fool and some of his backstory that the author had made up was really entertaining, and it is sort of nice that this book ends a little bit happier than the actual play. There are also some moments in here that are just comedy gold, especially if you are familiar with either King Lear or just Shakespeare in general. You probably will find something in here super hilarious. I have to say my favorite part was the green eggs and Hamlet bit. It is sort of fun to just read the mayhem and insanity that is this book. I will say though that I didn't really love this book overall. I do think it would be not the type of book for everyone. A lot of the humor is really crass and kind of lowbrow, which in a way kind of makes sense because some of Shakespeare's humor was actually sort of lowbrow. So I think he was just kind of playing up on the fact that that really is part of Shakespeare, even though people think of it as very highbrow literature. Some of his jokes were not always about like cutesy things. So I think it was trying to play up on that fact, and I didn't really fault him on that because he does give a warning in the front that if you're offended by any of these such and such things, like, don't read this book. Some of the humor did go a little too far for me, and it made me kind of like, ew, no TMI, a little too much information. And also some of the humor became really repetitive as I was going on through the novel. So I think what he was trying to do is to create some running jokes that would go throughout the story, but what basically happened, I don't know if this is because I'm reading it and not watching it as like a movie or something, basically it was like, you told this joke already and it was funny the first time, but after about the 8th time, it's not really funny anymore. Though the mayhem and insanity was fun, at points I do feel like there was a little too much mayhem and insanity. Needless to say, it was very hard to rate this book because there were some really good comedic awesome moments and the actual concept of the book is really interesting, but there were also some things in there that kind of bothered me or I didn't think were that awesome. But finally, at the end of the day, I decided to rate it 3 stars or maybe 3.5 stars, kind of in that range. I think I might have been more open to reading 4 stars, but I feel like for me to rate something 4 stars, I have to be really willing to reread the book, and though there were some things in here that I enjoyed, I probably wouldn't reread it, which is why I kind of settled in that 3-star range. However, I didn't dislike it necessarily, and I am open to reading the second book in the duology, so I definitely didn't hate the book. It was just okay. On to my to be read for the month of March. I'm going to keep it really small for the month of March because my currently reading shelf is just massive in my mind. It's just, I'm reading a lot of books that I have been reading for a long time and just have gotten halfway through everything and not finished, and that's kind of driving me crazy. So I don't want to like add too much to the insanity. But if by some miracle I happen to complete at least a little bit of the books that I'm currently reading, I will try to squeeze in reading Anne of the Windy Poplars, which is the 4th book in the Anne of Green Gables series, and I will try to complete The 1000th Floor by Catherine McGee. So that was my February wrap-up as well as my to be read for the month of March. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you all on Sunday. Thank you for watching. Bye!